here. And also you've got the kind of stress management, the lifestyle, the other things. And the four of those work together to have a good functioning immune system. It's not just about the nutrition. And so I'm going to talk about nutrition, but if we've got a bit of time, I will touch on the other things, because I found some quite interesting research about sleep and exercise and other things with immunity. So nutrition for immunity. It's not going to surprise you, there's no one magic food that we can all eat that's going to help us stay well and help avoid infections. But there are some important nutrients that we need to include on a daily basis to support immunity, so that our immune system can function to the best of its ability. So I'll just whiz through those and the foods that they include, and summarise that at the end. But this is probably not going to be new information to many of you. So the first thing is you need your vitamin A, which you get from liver and oily fish, dairy and eggs, but also from your colourful fruit and vegetables. So your orange and yellows, but also your dark green leafy vegetables. You also need vitamin D. Now, vitamin D has had a lot of interest recently, because we used to think it was just all about calcium and bones. And of course, we know now that it's really, really important for the immune system. So that is obviously the sunlight vitamin, but I was doing some research today that in latitudes, even where I am in the south of France, in latitudes, more northern latitudes, in the winter, the sunlight is not strong enough to make any vitamin D from your skin. So you need to really be getting it through food in the winter months. So your oily fish and eggs are good sources.
And
sorry?
And for vegans?
For vegans, you would have to take a vegan supplement. Because you can't get vitamin D from animal product, vegetable products. So you can get a vegan vitamin D. No, hang on, vitamin D vegan. Yeah, you can get specific vegan vitamin D supplements that can cover you for that. But in the summer, it's about getting outside, and it's just for us coming into the spring, exposing your skin sensibly to sunshine is going to help you manufacture some vitamin D. You've got your vitamin E, which is quite easy with nuts and seeds and avocados. And then vitamin C, we always think of vitamin C as your citrus fruits, but also there's a lot of vegetables that have vitamin C in them, including potatoes. So don't forget about the veg when it comes to vitamin C. There's also the two important minerals, zinc and selenium, which are quite often deficient in people. And these, again, you can get them from vegetable sources like your Brazil nuts and seeds, but meat and seafood are very, very high, have higher levels of zinc in them and selenium. So basically, when it comes to food, the summer is to have a wide range to cover all the food groups, good quality fatty foods like the fish and the avocados and the seeds, and a range of coloured fruits and vegetables, like eating your rainbow every day.
Hi Lucy, is it true that if you peel fruit or vegetables, you lose a lot of the nutrients?
Yes, it can be. It depends on the vegetables, and it depends probably how it's grown and the soil it's grown in as well. So yes, yeah, but the thing is, it depends on potatoes. You might not want to eat them with the peel on, but then you could eat them baked with the peel on like that, or carrots.
You mean if they've been covered in pesticides and things?
Exactly. So that's where you need to sort of think, well, if it's organic, it's probably okay. If not, do I peel it and lose out on the vitamin C, or do I eat the peel and then risk pesticides? It's always a bit like that. But yes, that is true, that you can lose out on some of the nutrients. And also cooking methods as well. You're boiling things for a long time, you do lose the vitamin C. That's why steaming is better, steaming or steam frying.
And what about quantities?
So I'm going to come on to quantities, because what is emerging is it's not so much about the quantity when you're talking about fruits and vegetables, but it's about the variety and getting in as many different fruit and vegetables and plant foods as you can through the space of a week. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, because that's quite an interesting thing. But a couple of specific foods. So something that's really basic is keeping hydrated. because dehydration is a risk factor for urinary tract infections and kidney infections, and particularly in the older population who are often not quite so good about drinking water. It's something that's very simple that we just need to keep on top of with the hydration. Other foods, bone broths like chicken stocks, adding to soups and stews, the sort of thing that your grandmother would have cooked, that's very old-fashioned, is really coming back in now. And in fact, there was a scientific study done on chicken soup, and they did prove that I think, I'm not sure of the exact details, but they did prove that it improved your recovery from a cold, chicken soup, because it's got some really, really good things in it. So chopping up your chicken carcass to make chicken stock, it can be a bit of a fiddle, but it is really worth it if you're trying to support immunity or get better from something. Other specific foods are the fermented foods, which again, traditional foods that have really come back into vogue recently. The sauerkraut, kefir, miso, kimchi, kombucha, sourdough bread even. And these foods are so brilliant because they contain live bacteria, and that then contributes to your gut microbiome, the bacteria in your gut. Which leads on very nicely to the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is one of my favorite subjects, the gut microbiome. And there's been, again, an explosive amount of research in the last 5 years on this. And most people know that in your digestive system, you've got all these bacteria, about 2 kilos. An adult has about 2 kilos of bacteria in their digestive tract, about 5,000 species. It's absolutely incredible. And these bacteria play really, really important roles for our whole system. Harvesting energy from food, they help make neurotransmitters like serotonin to make you feel good. They make enzymes like lactase to break down your lactose, vitamin B vitamins, vitamin K. But the thing that this really links to is it's so important for your immunity. The gut bacteria and the kinds of bacteria you have residing in you make a huge difference to your immunity. So I just did a few little facts here when I was doing some research. The gut bacteria of westernized populations is different to those on more traditional diets. And we tend to have a lower variety. And a low variety of gut bacteria, the kind of bacteria, is associated with things like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and even mental health. So we're finding out...
Which population is this one?
So westernized, so a standard American diet. This was an American paper that I read. It's westernized American diets.
They have low.
Probably not you guys as a Western, but the westernized diet, your typical kind of processed food diet.
Yes.
The gut bacteria that people have on those diets is very, very different to people on traditional diets. And they have found these links with people with a poor gut bacteria are more likely to have certain health conditions or certain negative health conditions. And they've done a big project in America called the American Gut Project. And they found that people regularly consuming 30 or more different plant foods in a week had a more diverse gut microbiome. And a more diverse gut microbiome is associated with positive health outcomes and immunity. So when you think about regularly consuming 30 different plant foods a week, that can sound quite overwhelming, but actually if you break it down, it can be quite easy to include those kinds of foods. And when we talk about plant foods, we mean fruits and vegetables, obviously, your nuts and seeds and pulses, and your grains, things like rice and quinoa, they are included in plant foods. So if you can tweak your diets a little bit and add things in here and add things in there, it can be relatively easy to do, but it's about consuming different things. And on a personal level, I've been working on this as well, because I used to go shopping and buy the same things, like 2 bags of onions, 2 bags of carrots, but all the same, and cook with the same vegetables, because I thought it was all about get your 5 a day, which it did used to be. And now I'm doing a bit more variety, so I might buy a yellow onion and a red onion and some shallots and some spring onions, because that counts as variety. So basically, the more diverse your diet is, the more diverse your gut microbiome is, and you have health benefits, improved immunity. And also it can be quite quick. You can change the profile of your gut bacteria relatively quickly with dietary changes. So even if your diet has been a bit poor, you can quite easily make those changes. It's quite interesting. So how to feed your gut bacteria? Your gut bacteria love fiber and fibrous foods. So anything, fruit and vegetables, seeds, all that kind of thing, they absolutely love it. And that can be why when you eat something like artichokes or a lot of fibrous food, you do get wind and fermentation because the bacteria are feeding on it and multiplying, which is brilliant. So it's all about the diversity. So how can we maximize that? Fruit and vegetables, and I always say veg, go for as much vegetables, go for as many vegetables as you can, and many different vegetables. And what I tend to say to clients is as well, which can be quite difficult, make vegetables the main event of your meal. Instead of, I think in England, we tend to kind of think about the meat or the fish or the main protein bit as the main, but really make the vegetables really interesting and make them the main part of your meal. Eating a rainbow a day, it can be quite fun if you've got children. You can get them to kind of count whether you've included your rainbow every day. Have you had a red food? Have you had an orange vegetable? Kind of thing. Don't forget about the pulses and the beans and the lentils that you can add into soups and casseroles to bulk those out. And also, when you next go shopping for fruit and veg, try new or forgotten foods. Again, we get into habits of buying the same thing. So think, okay, I might try that. I might buy artichokes. I might buy that weird cabbage that I haven't eaten for ages, and experiment with it. Rummage around in your herbs and spices cupboard and see what you can use that you haven't used for ages. Chinese, if you include an Indian meal, a Chinese meal, a Thai meal, you're going to be using lots of herbs and spices. And again, the compounds in these herbs and spices are food for the gut bacteria. The colourful compounds feed them, and they absolutely love them. I love things like coleslaws, making coleslaws with lots of raw cabbage and beetroot and celeriac even, and carrots, red cabbage, white cabbage, green cabbage. There can be a lot of variety out there. And so when Val was talking about portions, what it seems to be, it's more about variety than the volume. So say you're making an omelette and you've got some chives, chop the chives on, and that will count as an extra, number one in your 30 a week. And yeah, so variety rather than volume. And it can be quite a fun thing to do, to kind of count how many over the course of a day or 3 days, how many different plant foods you can include in. So for example, if you're having for your breakfast, instead of the normal cereal, you have some normal cereal and then add some things on, add some blueberries, add some cinnamon, add something here, add it in there, add some extra seeds on, and see if you can up the level by over the course of a few days. So that was really, does anyone have any questions about the sort of nutrition? I wanted to kind of keep it really positive and not be saying, oh, don't eat this and don't eat that, but to say, really put in as much as you possibly can of the good stuff. Does anybody have anything that they want to maybe add or ask?
Ooh, everybody here is talking about turmeric, Lucy. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so turmeric has got huge anti-inflammatory properties. And again, for immunity, for a healthy immune system, you don't want too much inflammation in the system. So turmeric can be something that you can add in. But again, it's not just about having one thing. You can reduce inflammation or get a really anti-inflammatory diet by including a huge range of foods. But yeah, turmeric certainly for therapeutic reasons as well, for people with inflammatory conditions, can be brilliant. The research on turmeric with the powders and the capsules, what seems to be coming out is actually probably better to use the real food in food. So grating the turmeric root into curries rather than taking supplements is possibly better, and also having it with fat and having it with black pepper seems to enhance the absorption. So sometimes with these things, when you read, you've got to look at the form that they're in and the way it's been delivered into your system, because it's not going to be the same absorption from a real food as it be from a supplement.
Okay. Thank you.
That's okay.
Yeah, and with the immune system, you know, when people talk about having onions and garlic, or that is more to fight, you know, or to prevent other, you know, getting stuff.
Yeah, so onions and garlic sort of have a dual role, because they are prebiotic foods and that they really feed the gut bacteria. So there's that link there, and that they will feed the beneficial gut bacteria, giving a more variety and more volume of them. But also they do have compounds in them, the sulfur-containing compounds, that are antioxidant as well. So they will be disarming free radicals from inflammation, from an infection or something. So they have a kind of dual role. Garlic is actually very antibacterial as well. So again, if you've got, you know, not dodgy guts, but if you've got a sort of gut imbalance in your gut bacteria, sort of raw garlic can help readdress that balance. I think possibly garlic might be antifungal as well. I'd have to look that up, but it is a natural antibacterial, the garlic.
What about sugars, Lucy? Are there good and bad sugars?
I'd say most sugar is, I don't really like using the word bad, but sugar is something that we do generally want to reduce down. And also in terms of immunity, sugar stimulates the insulin response, which is inflammatory, which is not going to help an immune situation. And when you talk about sugars, honey gets a really good press, but at the end of the day, it's still sugar, and it is still going to stimulate an insulin response, adding to any inflammatory situation. So you've got the sugars in fruit, those which are better because they're less quickly absorbed. And if you're eating fruit with the fiber, you don't get such a sugar hit. But for somebody who's very sensitive to sugar, things like a lot of fruit and fruit in smoothies might not be a good idea, or too much of them might not be a good idea, because it's too much of a sugar hit all in one. But yes, in terms of supporting immunity, easing down on the sugar is a good thing. Is a good thing to do. And that's even honey and maple syrup and all these, they're still sugar at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Acidophilus.
Sorry.
From live yogurt.
Sorry, Simon.
Acidophilus from live yogurts and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in fact, I didn't put live yogurt in those foods, but absolutely live yogurts. Yeah, live yogurts are fantastic with the acidophilus in it. That adds to your beneficial gut bacteria as well. And that's really what the kefir is, the fermented milk. The kefir is like probiotic yogurt kind of on steroids. It has absolutely masses and masses of good gut bacteria. So if you're into that kind of thing, and you can get hold of some kefir granules, if you know anybody that's making kefir, that's an absolutely brilliant thing to do.
And the ones you buy in the supermarket, they're good as well, aren't they?
The ones you buy in the supermarket are good, but they're not going to be as good as something that you've made at home, because they're not going to be as diverse. The thing about kefir is it picks up the bacteria from your environment, and so it's diversifying all the time. If you buy it from a supermarket, it's probably not going to be as varied, but it's still going to be good. In fact, I know somebody who's a doctor, a GP, who is actually prescribing kefir to his patients for mental health.
Oh, wow.
This is a GP that works in the main NHS, because he really believes it is so incredible, because it alters the gut microbiome, and that alters the neurotransmitters that are produced. So to me, that's very interesting.
Make at home?
Yeah.
Is it easy to make at home?
Very easy. It's very, very easy. You just need the granules that you need to, it's a bit like having a pet, because you have to sort of feed it every other day and sort of sieve it. But it's absolutely brilliant. You can add it to smoothies or have it in the place of yogurt. Very easy. There must be somebody in Lymington with kefir granules. I can't believe that there wouldn't be, if you're into it, if you've got the inclination. Does anyone have anything more about nutrition? Because I was going to touch a little bit on sleep. if that's okay, Val. Can I talk about sleep?
Of course, yeah.
Because again, sleep is one of those things that has had a huge kind of resurgence in research and popularity for people, because it seems to be quite a problem that a lot of people have. But basically, sleep is like your number one healing and repairing mechanism. And it kind of pains me to say it, but I would say that sleep is almost as important as nutrition. It might even be more important than nutrition, in that even if your nutrition is not that great, it might be more important to focus on the sleep, just from what I've read. And it's hard for me to say that, but sleep is so important. And like when we have children and, you know, with our babies, we're always focusing on their sleep, but we kind of forget about us a little bit. And the thing about sleep is that we do all the wrong things. We do all the things that disrupt sleep sort of on a daily basis. And it is the number one healing mechanism we have. So, you know, caffeine too late on in the day, alcohol stops you going into deep sleep, screens and blue light stop you going into the deep sleep or destroy the production of your melatonin, not enough time outside during the day, and stress. And I suppose what I wanted to say with sleep, if you feel that sleep is an issue for you with your healing and repair and your health, is to take a really good look at your evening routine and do some tweaks to that, to try and make your sleep better. Because if you can sleep well and you're not very well, if you can sleep well, you're kind of halfway there with your immunity. I don't know if people have got their Fitbits or trackers. You can track your deep sleep and see what helps and what doesn't. And I've kind of had personal experience from this, because I had real problems with my sleep last year for various reasons. And I sort of started self-experimenting on what was working for me. And I found that obviously I'm not doing it tonight, disconnecting after 8 o'clock in the evening or earlier, so getting away from the screens, away from social media and all that kind of thing really helped. No caffeine after 3 p.m. And the other thing was no chocolate in the evening. And in fact, I've had a couple of clients with this as well, who would have sort of dark chocolate in the evening, and then not sleep. And in fact, I had one client, and that was the only thing she did. She cut out the evening chocolate. She came to me for poor sleep. She cut out the evening chocolate, and her sleep totally changed. So again, sometimes it can be the really little things that can make all the difference. It doesn't have to be complicated. And alcohol in the evening is not good either, which is, you know, sorry about that, but it does stop you going into your deep sleep. So that's a little bit on sleep. Exercise, I'm obviously not the exercise expert. There's lots of people here who are, but exercise really influences your immune system as well. And I read a paper today. I got a bit sidetracked. I started reading this paper about the levels of exercise, and in fact, very intensive exercise suppresses your immune system, which won't surprise you. If you're doing a lot of sports, you are more susceptible to infections. And then I read this. I'm going to read this out to you actually. This came from this paper that was done in 2014, I think. Moderate exercise improves immune function and potentially reduces risk and severity of respiratory viral infection. And I just suddenly thought, that's very close to home with what's going on at the moment. But there was this research done where moderate exercise, keeping moving, made it more likely that you're going to sort of have a less severe respiratory viral infection if you caught one. And I thought that was very interesting. Physically active people have reduction in bacterial infections. So obviously the type of exercise you do is important, but it's important to keep moving and do something.
And
going very quiet, Lucy.
Clarifying on that, guys, is because there has been a lot published about that, obviously, because of what's going on, especially between us and in all the government, So, for example, I can't, even if I go and do a long run, I can't even say about it, because it can be considered that, I'm a bad example for
risk.
But it's all relative. So it's all relative with what you normally do. It's the same as when you're pregnant, when they say, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's all relative with what you're doing. So if people that normally run and you're preparing for a marathon, and we all know that we're pushing it, but we accept it and just make sure we sleep more, we eat better. But now that there isn't those races, so we don't need to perform or anything, what Lucy's saying is, it kind of, we can tie to that as keep moving, keep fit. We can do some sort of intensity, but we don't need to push it as hard as we would do if we want to perform for a race, because we don't have that goal right now. However, putting a little bit of intensity as a way of working our heart. So, it's a balance. So, the sort of training I might do for a race, I'm putting myself at risk. But if you do like a bit of running that you're doing now regularly, because in England we're not locked in, Lucy, so people can go out for an hour of exercise every day. So I think that is about right. It's just keeping the balance.
Absolutely, thank you, Val. It was just interesting reading that. It sort of hit home when it said about respiratory infection. You're more likely to recover from a respiratory infection if you do moderate exercise. And I said that's a reason to get out and move. If there's any reason, it was spooky in a way. And then just my final bit was a bit about kind of, I didn't want to say stress management because I don't like that word, but feel good factors. Because stress affects the immune system so clearly now. We know so much more now. Stress impacts negatively on the immune system. So it's about reversing that and thinking about all the things we can do to make us feel good and to reduce the stress that we're feeling. Also, when we're stressed, interestingly, we do tend to make the wrong food choices. And although that's psychological, there is a kind of biochemical drive for that as well. When we're stressed, we tend to reach for the more sugary foods, or we might have more alcohol or whatever it is. So that's another reason to really look at the things that make you happy, your relationships, the connections and your hobbies and interests. And what I feel quite sad about is that, relaxing or taking time out, it's almost, we've sort of been made to feel guilty about stopping and relaxing and taking time out. And I'm always thinking of ways about how I can address that balance in my own life. And we talk about sort of deep breathing and meditation, and they're brilliant for lowering stress, but it's not everybody's thing. And I suppose it's about finding what relaxes you, what makes you take time out of your kind of daily schedule, and just stopping and doing nothing for a while and just chilling out. Because it affects your immune system. So that was really what I wanted to say about that. And that was really what I wanted to cover, and to kind of keep it positive. It's about increasing the variety, trying different foods, moving, sleeping well, and taking time out to relax.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thanks, Lucy. I have a nutrition question for you.
Yes, please.
Interesting what you were saying about the sugar sensitivity. So I'm a bit of a snacker, and I will always reach for some fruit, and so I have a lot of fruit throughout the day. What would you recommend as an alternative, or to mix it up a little bit more? What would be your top 1-2 snacks?
What I would do is look at the meal that there's two things that you can do. When fruit is a great snack to have, and it's much better to have fruit than it is to have many other things. So don't stop the fruit. But what you can do is combine the fruit with, say, a handful of almonds or a handful of seeds, because the protein and the fat in those seeds will help delay the absorption of the sugar and help it be less of a sugar hit on your system. You might find that you're less likely to snack later on because your blood sugar hasn't gone up and down again. The other thing is, if you are a bit snacky through the day, it's looking at the meal you've had beforehand, and was that a good, satisfying, balanced meal? Because we should really be able to go 3-4 hours between our meals without snacking. But it depends what you've eaten before. If you've had I'm sure this isn't what you wouldn't be had, but if you had, say, a bowl of Rice Krispies for breakfast, you are going to be hungry in 2 hours' time, or even an hour and a half, because it's not very sustaining. If you have something with some fat in it, with some protein in it, along with your carbohydrates, you are more likely to be able to sugar without snacking. But
There's
try
also the
combining
mix between-
some nuts with a piece of fruit.
Yeah. I think it's partly habit. I mean, I eat like a king at breakfast, and then it sort of tails off through the day. So perhaps it's partly habit as well.
Is it not, Lucy, also the mix between sugary citrus fruit and more fibrous fruit? So oranges are pretty sugary. So pears or apples maybe a bit less sugar and more fibre.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I always say to people, think about the fruits that are slightly lower in sugar are the fruits that are grown in England in the summer. So your apples, exactly what you said, your apples, pears, plums and berries are lower GI, lower sugar. Whereas your tropical fruits, your bananas and your mangoes and your pineapples, which are really sweet, are much higher in sugar. So if there's a choice to go for one of the fruits, citrus is a bit funny because citrus are quite fibrous, but again, they're quite sweet. So they're a bit middle of the road. But try combining a piece of fruit with some seeds, or even if you have an apple, have a chunk of cheese with it as well, because the protein and the fat delays the absorption of that sugar and makes it less of a hit on your system.
I like that suggestion.
Fromage with it. Try it and see whether you're less likely to snack later on. Whether it's a kind of blood sugar thing or a more habitual thing. We are about to cut off, I think, aren't we?
Yes, that's what I'm just saying. But if there's more questions, we connect again.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Lucy.
Thank you.
Lovely to see some friendly faces.
Any questions?
No? Nope.
Really good.
No, thank you, Lucy.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. It's lovely to talk to you all. Pleasure. Have a good rest of your evening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next Thursday, Anna, who is over there, talking about osteopathy and self-treatment. You should join in, Lucy.
Yes. When is it?
Next Thursday.
When is it? Next Thursday. I'm writing in my diary. Yes, I definitely need that. Next Thursday, same time. I'll be there.
Hannah.
People can't go and see anyone, so we just need to learn how to self-treat. Maybe Kay can help as well.
Yeah. You could do a demonstration.
We can do a demonstration, have Tom. Hannah treats horses as well, but I just said no, not with a horse. Don't treat a horse. Yeah. Be gentler.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, Karen. My pleasure. Hope everyone can take something away from it.
It's really useful. Thank you.
Good, pleasure.
We write a little recap on it and write down a few of the things, and then
I've got my notebook.
So Fiona, no,
You've just volunteered yourself.
Oh, no.